Hello and welcome back to Processing the Process, where we capture and discuss the technical, psychological, and contextual dynamics that shape the process of creating a work of art. Week by week, moment by moment, we're following Jonathan Riddell, choreographer and artistic director of Riddell Dance Theater, as he creates his latest works for RDT's Second Story Dance project and delves into new creative territory. This week, we will be bringing you up to date on the Albany Berkshire Ballet Project and Jonathan's demo album.
Almost done.
Lots of exciting news to share. So first, we'll begin with ABB. Now, led by Lisa, who we have lauded so many times, she's so
worth
wonderful.
Lauding.
Indeed, if I pronounce that properly. Led by Lisa, the dancers rehearsed several more times after the last rehearsal that you were able to attend.
Right.
So it was great that they got that time in, and it was particularly wonderful that ABB's executive director was able to attend some of them and give what Lisa reports are terrific notes and coaching. And it's particularly wonderful because this executive director really understands Jonathan's style, approach, and type of choreography. So I am sure that was tremendously beneficial.
Thank you.
Well, here we are approaching the show day and during the show day, and ladies and gentlemen, of course, there were a number of external challenges because there always are in every artistic process. So, here we go. Number one. Because the piece was finished quite close to showtime, there was a last-minute scramble for costumes for the new dancers, sort of all the way up to the wire, but you prevailed, you got it, they fit, and they looked fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So that it was a little tricky, but it worked beautifully.
Yeah, it's always tense.
And there it is.
Come showtime, yeah.
Number two, you're going to love this. Jonathan's sister Lisa was on her way up to John's house to babysit for the kids so that Jonathan could attend the performance when, her car broke down, and Jonathan gets a call and has to think very quickly, which he did, and retrieves his wife's car from the train station, runs and gets his sister, who is stranded on the side of the road, brings her to his house, and lo and behold, John made it to the performance on time. But maybe even more importantly, Edgar and Eliza made it to Kung Fu on time.
That was very important.
Exactly. Perhaps
it
the
was
most
how
important.
do we fit all three of these things in? My sister's car, me getting to the show, my kids getting to their Kung Fu class.
Absolutely. And once again, with John's determination, it happened. Yes. And finally, when John arrived at ABB, the event presenter and the executive director approached him to speak a bit before the Verdant Fire Duet and Verdant Fire Quartet were performed. Yikes, we weren't expecting that. However, John had spoken before the quartet was danced at ABB's spring show, so at least you had a little bit of a few ideas from that previous speech. And John decided, I'm going to take a humorous and very human approach to what it is I say. So I think that kind of took the pressure off of you a little bit. And of course, as John's preparing mentally, he receives word that he really needs to condense it because there is an artist who follows him who needs all of this setup time. So quickly do the, Cliff Notes version. Edit. And then there's a 180-degree turn several minutes later when he is informed, could he please speak for a longer period of time because this particular artist, in fact, will not be in the program and we need to fill time. So, well, oh my goodness. But John, once again,
so I pulled out my stand-up routine and I went for it. Yeah.
And in all of these cases of external challenges, you really went for it and prevailed. And so here we are, the show day arrives and everything is in place. So, John, would you take us through your speech, the Verdant Fire duet, the Verdant Fire quartet, with an eye to your assessment of the way they were performed technically and artistically, and also, and equally as important, I think, how you experienced them emotionally.
Okay. Yeah, well, I always get nervous before I have to speak in front of people, even you people. But I'm getting more and more used to it. And it is. It's about being as prepared as you can, knowing what it is you want to say, whether you know every word or not. And so I just tried to quickly piece together an outline of bullet points that I wanted to address. A rough order of those bullet points, and particularly this time around, I tried to just kind of relax and trust myself. Part of what you had mentioned that I had told you is I was like, I just need to get up there and be a human being, and if I think about allowing myself to be funny, then I kind of relieve the pressure to be very very well spoken and to deliver a message, that's succinct and important and impactful. I was like, hey, I'm just going to go up there and talk to these people. There were a few people out there who I knew and loved very much, so I was like, I'm just going to go out and pretend like I'm talking to them, because I quite literally was.
Yes.
I don't know. So that's what I did. / that's my advice if you suddenly have to publicly speak. It's always hard to speak about one's work. I find, especially determining what is important and what is interesting to other people. But as you had mentioned, since I had already introduced the Verdant Fire Quartet at a previous show, I kind of just went off of what I said there. And I wanted to explain to the audience that the piece is actually 4 movements long, and what they were going to see on that night was 2 of those 4 movements. So I then tried to succinctly explain what each movement was about, I guess is a good way to say it, but sort of the content of the 4 movements, because there is a just a very subtle, simple through line. And even though they don't need to have seen the first movement to enjoy the second and the third, it's kind of nice to know what happens in that first movement. And they indeed asked me to get up and speak about it. So I was like, I guess this is a very clear thing I should tell you about. And I explained that. And then after the third movement, there's a finale section. I also then explained that the second movement, which is the first thing they were going to see, was newly created for ABB. It was its premiere performance that night. So that was very exciting, and I was frank about how excited and nervous I was. And I think, again, that's just a very real thing to admit, very honest thing to admit, and the audience seemed to kind of chuckle and appreciate that. And that with the second and third movement now in place, our sort of hope going forward, and I decided this was good to share, is that hopefully we can then set the first and the last movement on ABB, and all four pieces will be put together. That's the hope that the director and I have discussed for this coming season. So we'll hope that happens. And I even nodded to the audience. I said, and with public funding, because that is necessary. Maybe there's a donor out there in the audience that wanted to take that hint. And if not, it's just, again, interesting information. So so all of that, I was like, okay, it's okay to say that stuff and put that out there. So that's what I did. And I felt good about it. I got to walk off stage and feel like, all right, that was good speech.
Okay.
Good speech. But who cares about my speech? How did the dancing go? The dancing was beautiful. I was very happy. Now, of course, I knew it would be beautiful. These are great dancers, and they care about the work. And it was a lovely venue. Just everything about it was lovely. So I was like, okay, this is gonna be great, and it was. So, like, gosh, what a beautiful thing, right?
Wow.
But of course, you're always nervous with the premiere that it's the first time the dancers are doing it. Any performance can have mistakes and mishaps and weird things and people tripping or lights falling down, who knows, whatever. But for a premiere, you're like, I just need this first one to go off well because it's the very first one. And at the same time, premieres are often raw. They're often it's the brand spanking new version. It's not necessarily the most polished, the most refined version, which can be great or it can be just fine. I thought this was a really lovely performance that they put on. I could see that we had very little time to create this, but again, the dancers rose to the occasion. They did not waste any time, and I was pleased because I didn't know these dancers so well except for Lisa, who's danced with me for years, but as to how they might sort of delve into dramatic nuance, only because I just didn't know them as performers that well in that respect. And I was very, very pleased to see that there was already a certain attitude and an intensity about what they were doing. In the duet, there are some very loving, sensual moments, and all of that nuance was there, and I could tell that they were thinking about it and feeling it. So I was like, yes, they're professionals. That's what professionals do. But you never know it until you see it with your own eyes. So I want to say thank you to all those guys. You did a great job. So I was pleased. It was worth the 2.5 hour drive up there and back to see my little, how long was 12 minutes of dancing. And I was also pleased on the program. The executive director's piece was beautiful. Hey Mary, I really liked your piece. So that was the other piece that the company presented that night. And and it's always great to when you see your colleagues' work and it resonates with you, and it reminded me that I was in good company, that these are artists that I respect and appreciate working with. So all of that was, it was like, oh, this is a good night. That's kind of the night you want. You want that kind of a show.
Oh, yes. And John, you shared with me your delight in the feedback you received.
Yeah, the feedback was great. The audience, their applause was resounding. The presenter, the owner of the venue, the director, colleagues of the company, some of the studio owners, dance studio owners in the area who were there, all came up to me afterwards and were very complimentary of my work. And
It's fabulous.
yeah, that's wonderful to know. Kind of on you're getting great feedback from all spectrums, from the casual audience goer to people who really know dance, to people who really know these dancers, specifically. People from different dance genres, but so they know dance, but they don't necessarily know your style, and then they appreciate it. It's
Right.
like, again, wow, thank you, and yeah, it's like, again, that was worth the 2.5-hour commute, sure.
Absolutely. And bravo to you. I got a little choked up there thinking about it. It must be unbelievably exciting and gratifying
Yeah.
to see that kind of result after all of the hard work that you very candidly and painstakingly explained to us for several weeks. So I think this is a shared experience, actually.
We did it!
Yay! And in fact, I think a "we did it" kind of response is how you've been feeling about your work on your demo album. What a great segue. Well, as John said, most of the songs are essentially finished. We'll see what he says next week about that. But
yes.
And that you've been tinkering with various details, including adding in vocal harmonies. But there have been 2 songs that have been presenting particularly devilish challenges for Jonathan. And in the areas of structure, composition, technical elements. So, John, would you take us through your process of addressing these challenges for each of these 2 songs? And because I think that'll give us a really good idea of what it is like to actually compose electronic music.
I will try. Let's see. So this one song in particular, it was originally called The Showdown, so we'll refer to it as that for right now. It was a song I like all my songs, but this one I kind of particularly liked just because it was very different from the others. And it had kind of this swagger to it, and I kind of fancied that. The lyrics describe a person who kind of wakes up in a daze and realize they've been sort of abandoned, so then they go to find the person who abandoned them, and they wind up in this epic fight, a literal physical fight, that's just vengeful and vicious, and then in the end they wind up both passed out on the floor, kind of bleeding to death, kind of thing. It's kind of a sad ending, but
very light,
it's very light fare,
stuff.
The typical John stuff. But and the song ends with them just kind of, and there's a question posed as to like, was it worth it? And at any rate, the response I was getting, though, from others, which of course doesn't matter at all, was like, it's cool, John, but like it's not quite jiving, and there's something about it that's a little repetitive. There's something about it that just doesn't quite sit right, and I was starting to hear it. Like when I listened to it, I was like, oh, okay, I get that, I get it. So after a long time of just trying to like tweak really subtle things about it, like, oh, maybe if I just, attack the vocals a little differently, try and put in more variations in the beats and the drumming and things like that, just to make it, to keep catching your ear. Eventually I was like, I gotta go back to the drawing board with this one and kind of slash it up. And I was really reluctant to do that, especially because like I said, it told a story. So I always panic when if you have a linear progression from the beginning to the end of the song and suddenly you're gonna cut it up, it's like, what am I about to do? Right. These aren't just separate verses and I can just pop one out, no problem. It's like the whole flow, the whole story has to happen. Right. But finally I was convinced. I was like, there's just no way I'm going to be happy with this song until I do this. And but the first thing I did actually was add in. So the structure went verse, pretty much verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. Very straightforward that way. But I was like, okay, I need to add a bridge after each chorus, because the rhythm of the verses and the choruses were almost identical. It was kind of the same rhythm over and over again, but with a sort of pattern change to it. And I was like, okay, put in a bridge that has a totally different rhythm, totally different melody, so that breaks up that monotony. So I did that, and it improved the song substantially. And I was like, oh, great, cool. I tried to get a little bit of feedback on it, and the feedback was, good start, but keep going. And I was like, yeah, okay, probably right. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So then I had an idea, and this was kind of wacky, of adding a bridge before each chorus. So it would go verse, bridge, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, blah, blah, blah. And the two bridges were very different. So bridge A, bridge B. And bridge A was going to be really different from anything else in the song. So it kind of takes you out of the story. It's kind of like fade to the narrator kind of a thing. Come out of the story, let's hear what these guys have to say. Okay, now let's go back in. And I did this really interesting harmony where the voices are really close in pitches, and so it kind of sounds very eerie and dissonant, and it kind of sounded like, because there's sort of this reference to angels watching over this fight, or something like that. Anyway, so I kind of, in my mind, these were like the devil angels, like having their little ha 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 moment, and now let's see what these humans do to each other. So in my mind, it all worked and made sense. And then of course,
that's what counts. Anyway.
And then I play it for a few people, and they're like, "Ooh, okay, well this is different, and this is kind of going in a whole other direction." And it's making this song very complicated. And I was like, yeah, isn't it? It's layered, and it's got all this complexity. Don't you dig it? And it, in my mind, it sort of went down this really Marilyn Manson-y road when he gets completely theatrical and weird, which I dig, and while I don't think, by the way, I don't think any of these versions are actually really bad songs. It's just, is it as good as the other songs on the album that I just love, and when I play them for other people, they love it too. And it's not a superficial love. It's like oh yeah, you nailed it. And it just wasn't getting that you nailed it feeling.
Right.
And I had to admit that to myself. And
ooh, that's hard.
And especially after this new twist that I threw in and I was so excited about. And I remember I was like gleeful to play it for people and they were like, I was like, I almost laughed actually when I got a negative reaction because I was so certain. I was like, I've done it. This is it, right? No. So I was like, so again, laughing to myself, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go to bed and sleep on it.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I kind of just want to stick to my guns, but I bet in the morning I'll have relaxed and I will maybe have a brainstorm. Maybe I'll have a good dream, and I bet you in the morning I'm gonna have some ideas about how to really change this song. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. It's like, do I know myself? Was I praying and the universe delivered? Maybe. So I cut out everything that I had added, and I even cut out the chorus completely. And the chorus, mind you, was the original inspiration for the song itself.
Wow.
It was this back and forth of, if you hit me, I hit you back. If you scratch me, I scratch you back. And I thought, oh, that's going to be this great, like, you can just see people in the audience, like, cheering back, like, it's this great back and forth call and response thing. Like, this is going to be a great song, right? And so that initial seed for this song, I was like, well, that's got to go too. Because what I really wanted to have still was the story of this fight. So I wanted to keep the verses. That was, and if the verses and the chorus are just too similar, then, and it's not working, it can work, but in this case it wasn't working. The chorus had to go. So that was very much like chopping off a limb, or even half of my own body in terms of how that felt. But, I can save that chorus idea for later. That's what I say.
Can always be revisited. But you did stay true, it sounds like, to your storytelling instincts.
Yes.
And that was really primary.
Yes.
When all is said and done.
My storytelling instincts were primary, and how I felt in the moment. I had to trust myself, like, and I have enough experience through my years of choreography to know, like, sometimes your favorite moment, it just has to get cut, because it's
always hard, though.
It's the thing that has to go in order for the rest to really elevate. So so there I was with these verses, and so what I did is I started to strip. Once I stripped all that stuff away, I was really just left with this very that swagger that I talked about. All I had was that's kind of all that was left was swagger and the story. And when I just kind of listened to the beginning, I was like, okay, how does this feel? And it feels now, with all that stuff gone, much more sensual. So I was like, okay, let this be a really sexy song. It was supposed to be this angry rock kind of stomp, but now I'm gonna go kind of sexy. And in my previous iterations and trying to make the song work, I realized that I needed to focus the style in a more rockabilly kind of a way, which made me think of the Stray Cats. It was kind of a very Stray Cats song, if you know that group. And I knew and with that in mind, I knew I really wanted to have it be danceable. I really wanted it to be a hot dance track. All that said, I started to sing the verses in a much more sensual way, which then made me say, oh, break them up, put space in between each line. Instead of line, 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 go line, space, line, space, line. Now you're adding a little tension, a little groove, a little feeling. And then you can start to pick it up. Then you go line, 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 and then and it starts to move things along, and so I play with that. I play with the spacing of the lines.
It sounds like choreography.
It
actually,
to me, it's very, it's all similar. Well, and especially because my choreographic training is very musical. We learn choreographic structures inspired by musical structures. So this all kind of just is different ways of executing ideas and feelings in your body. So so I was like, okay, this is working. And then, and what's funny too is then, and that's when I realized in the music there was a particular guitar riff that was looped throughout the whole song, which again, musically was the genesis for this song. I found that guitar riff and I was like, oh, I want to make a song with that guitar riff, and put all this other stuff around it. And now I had this sensuous little number, and the rhythm was starting to go, and I was like, oh, I can feel this song. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And I was like, but that stinking guitar riff is bumming me out. It's gotta go.
Wow.
And I trashed the guitar. I was like, wow, okay. So here I am. It kind of felt like, I spent months building a mountain, and then like a boulder rolled off the mountain, and I went, oh, I don't want the mountain anymore. I just want this boulder. Like that's kind of how this all kind of is.
Wow.
So then I kind of, that was all one day. That was one day's work. Everything I just did was like me just being like, I've got to make this happen. So then the next morning, I kind of did the same thing. I was like, now I need a chorus. And it's got to be a brand new chorus. I have no idea what it's going to be. But sleep on it and see what you come up with later. And sure enough, in the shower the next morning, I kind of was thinking about the song, and just it started to come. I started to think about what the song might mean, and part of it was also admitting, like, okay, this really is now a much more sexual song, a much more sensual song. So while the original was much more about a fight, and a platonic fight, it wasn't necessarily like a lover's relationship type fight. It could have been two enemies or two best friends who suddenly were at odds with each other. And this still could be, but no, we've gone down a much more sensual road. So let it be sexy. Go ahead and allow there to be references to a possible romantic relationship. At least I like when things dance that line. It's like, are they friends? Are they lovers? Are these men? Are these women? Who? What's going on here? I'm just trying to get to like universal truth. So, so I started coming up with this sexy little chorus, and then once I had the melody for the chorus and the first few lyrics, all the lyrics for that and the repeats of the chorus just came.
Wow.
And in 2 days, I had a brand new song. You'll still hear the same story. A lot of the verse lyrics are the same. I brought back some old lyrics that I had thrown away months ago, but they just suddenly said what I needed to say more effectively and succinctly. I was like, oh, bring that back. It was really just this amazing falling together of a collage of ideas.
Wow. I mean, here, ladies and gentlemen, is the definition of process. Right there.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no one right way. There is no one right way to tell a story.
Yeah.
And as I think, I just want to insert a thought, something you and I have spoken about many times, John, over the years, is thinking about different versions of whatever artistic endeavor you're engaged in. Each one is a work of art in and of itself.
Yeah.
There's no right one or wrong one, or each one is valuable in and of itself. And as you say, you may take elements and reconfigure them down the road in yet another way.
And it's also something I've learned over the years is embracing that, sort of having a good attitude about it. That because even if I fancy the idea that one of the older versions I will make work, so I can kind of have that version of that song, and that version of the song may come to light with that guitar riff back in, with that call and response chorus back in, so I could maybe figure out what that version of the song is. But even if it doesn't, all of that I went through was an amazing learning process.
Absolutely.
And it resulted in this song that I mean, I love this song.
It's great.
You'll hear it one day. You'll hear it soon. I can't wait for you all to hear it. And to me, and you may or may not agree, but to me, it also sounds so simple and straightforward. I think it's a pretty simple song, actually, that it's hard to believe in my mind that it went through this hugely convoluted creation process to come up with something that's actually very stripped down and streamlined and straightforward. So, hey.
It's likely as good as it is because of the nature of the process, in fact.
Maybe.
And I had a question that I wanted to pose to Jonathan that I would imagine many of us have thought about when we think about artists' process, really in any genre. But when Jonathan described to me the experience of this chorus that you ultimately settled upon just coming to him, in a way, my jaw again dropped open. Like, how does that happen? And I was wondering, and I know there's no strict formula, and you can't exactly quantify it, but if you were to think about process, would you say that coming up with the material that you ultimately decide upon is really a byproduct of a lot of experimentation and a lot of permutations, and it kind of evolves and emerges from that? Or is there a substantial amount of, shall we call it, muse visits, where things just come to you? And as, like in this case, as you said, the chorus just came to you. I mean, does it just depend on the day? Does it depend on the project?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, I think in my experience, it's a mix of both. Perhaps other artists value the noodling type work, and other artists value the more just bursts of inspiration. But I rely on both. I love to get in and noodle around and just play with things and experiment. But I also know when you have those bang good ideas, that's a great idea, and you just gotta like treasure it and own it and put it out there. And it does depend on the day. I think it depends on the problem. Problem being a good word, but like, what is it that you're trying to figure out? What is you're trying to solve? That's your problem as an artist. It depends on the problem. Sometimes you're like, I have these elements. I have to figure out in what configuration they work well together. Okay, that may take, like chess pieces, moving them around the board in many different ways, and that could take days for you to finally settle on one that you like, or you may never. In my case, you may never be completely satisfied, but it's good enough. I don't know, I was kind of thinking about in this process, it was really when I would noodle for a while, and then I would step back And then I would
Yes.
step back, and when I was back, then I would have that burst of inspiration and be able to go forward again. So it's kind of knowing like when to take a break, when to delve in, and that's just part of the, I don't know, kind of the joy of getting your hands dirty.
Is it possible, something just occurred to me, that those moments of inspiration are actually periods of consolidation that follow all of this work and experimentation and the piece by piece by piece progression, and that giving it time and space, and that enables it to kind of come together, and it feels like inspiration, but maybe in fact it did come?
Maybe, or maybe that's a third thing,
Element.
you know. Because certainly I believe that there is inspiration that, you know, comes from places we don't know or understand. You know, it really is just this idea that that comes to you. And I'm not saying it necessarily comes from an outside source, but maybe it's some early memory, and you don't even remember the memory, but suddenly you have this, it inspires an idea. Or maybe it's inspiration that comes out of the very specific work you're doing on your piece. It just needed sort of time to formulate.
Exactly. Fascinating to think about. Now, there was a second song that was giving you trouble, and initially, at least, John's feeling was that it was technical in nature, that the microphone that you have been using was distorting Jonathan's voice in a way that was not allowing you to get the result that you wanted.
Yeah. So this is a song that it has a very sort of acoustic feel to it. You use the term singer-songwriter feel, like, you know, a dude and a guitar kind of a feel to it.
Exactly.
And it's also sort of, I don't know if you'd use this word, Sherry. You've heard it, but it kind of has an epic feel to it. It's lengthy. It covers a very sort of global topic. I talk about sort of, the song talks about sort of different martyrs throughout history in different societies. Some who were very purposeful, who kind of boldly walked into the fire, and some who were victims of abuse or crimes, but who we then upheld as icons of a movement. And so the verses sort of, each one talks about a different person, and then the chorus is sort of my character's an expression of an emotional state of being really caught in, like, so am I supposed to, I'm someone who is kind of an outcast. I'm on the fringe of society. Is that my place, or am I supposed to boldly go forward and declare who I am, or declare what I feel is right? Am I supposed to, be a loudspeaker, fighting injustice, or am I supposed to be the quiet example of how I want things to be? And just that, I think we've all been there, and it's certainly where I live. I'm at a point in my life where, of course, I have very strong opinions, but I'm kind of in an incubation time of my life. I'm nesting. I'm raising 2 children, and so I can't be the dude that's like on the front lines of for causes I can support in my way, But at any rate, all of that is sort of where this song came from. And so we have a very simple sound of like guitar and a little drum and my voice. And it's telling this very sort of profound, deep, and broad-reaching topic. It's very personal. It's also very historic. Like it's like all these things, and but the song structure is very simple. It's verse, verse, chorus, verse, verse, chorus, verse, verse, chorus. Now, for this to work, and for such a long song, it's sort of my take that the vocal delivery has to be fabulous. It has to be. I have to suddenly become the type of singer that can captivate an audience for 8 minutes and deliver this story arc and go back and forth between talking about history and my own feelings. It's a lot. And
tall order.
It's a tall order, and and while the music grows and changes, the drum beats change. The tempo kind of picks up a little bit, but it pretty much stays very simple throughout. In order for that to work, everything I just said has to be there, and the quality of the recording has to be there. Because by the end of the song, my character is speaking very passionately. There's a lot of emotion and feeling. It's very and so in just performing it live, I would be singing very loudly by the end and with a lot of raw feeling. And my experience with my computer and my microphone are still new at best. I have no idea if I have good equipment, decent equipment, or poor equipment. I just don't. I'm new to this, and I can pretty much guess that what I'm working with as far as a microphone is it's picking up anything that's subtle and soft. All of my whispering, all of my kind of snarling, and all my kittenish vocals, and then even gritty like kind of stuff sounds great within this close proximity. But as soon as I sing at even like a medium volume, it just distorts. And if I pull the microphone away, which is what you would intuit might help, now it just sounds like the microphone is far away from the singer. So there's just something really off about my relationship to this particular microphone. And I'm sure there are people out there who will tell me in an instant, oh, well, what you need is this type of microphone, and you need to place it here, and you need to sing at this volume, and you'll be fine. Great. Write your comments. Let me know. It's on my to-do list next week to try and reach out to some friends of mine who can help me. But where I'm at right now with this song is I'm delivering it in a way that I like. If I were to sing it for you live, I think it would be effective, but I just can't record it in a way that I want to. And it leaves us with a song that is long, repetitive, and a little hard to listen to by the end because the vocals are all distorted by the end. Yikes. So, what do I do with that? Well, I've been sticking to my guns with it for a long time. I've been painstakingly adjusting like the volume levels on the recording so that I can buffer all those bleached out moments and fill it in. I've been trying to do overdubs, and when you record just like a little piece to cover up a mistake or a flub or a pop, something that you don't like in the recording. I've been doing all that, and I'm just like, it's as good sounding as I can get it, and it's still just not as we said, it's not a bad song, but is it as great as the other ones? And no, it's not, at least in this condition. So I am now faced with the drawing board moment again. Do I have to revamp this whole song structurally? And the answer is no, I don't have to, but I want to, because I want to at least have a version of this song that I can share soon. And I want it to be, I still believe so passionately about the message of this song and the approach I took to this song, that I think I can revamp it and maintain all of that, so it still will be the type of song I want it to be. It will still have all of that character and that message, but what I want to play with is, can I restructure it, perhaps add a very different chorus, perhaps add some instrumentation that's very striking and different, so it breaks up the monotony. Can I then keep the vocal delivery much more mellow so it sounds good in the recording, with hopefully the instrumentation and the structure being more varied? Perhaps that will work, so that I don't have to be singing loudly and project by the end. Maybe the music does that for me, and I can kind of keep the vocals more chill and still have it be effective. So that's my goal. I haven't arrived there completely yet, but as recently as this morning, I did a lot of work on the song, and I think I'm almost there. I have broken it up. I have created what I would call a second chorus. I've actually removed some of the verses, again, chopping off what, to me is some very important poetry, and some historical references to wonderful people who I wish I could reference in this song, but sorry, your verse has to go. That's just the way it is. And pardon us, I have to touch the screen for a second. There we go. There, we're back. But I feel really great about all the work I did this morning, and perhaps now if I sleep on it and work more in the morning, maybe we'll be there.
It worked before.
It worked before.
And the time before that, it's possible. So really, first, let me thank you, Jonathan, for taking us through moment by moment of your process, which obviously is idiosyncratic to John, but at the same time, I suspect is really representative of a universal experience of musical composers. So stay tuned for some next steps, as Jonathan has shared with me. One being what you referenced a little bit earlier, reaching out to colleagues in this field for some coaching, particularly of a technical nature, and perhaps helping you get over that hump a little bit. Another would be fleshing out the big picture context and concepts, and making sure that what it is you're doing really flows from that.
Right. Of the whole album.
Of the whole
album as a whole, and how it's packaged and presented.
Exactly. Which brings us to the third element and last one today, which is determining the best approach to use to share this demo with the public. So all of these things remain to be seen, so stick around and stay with us for our next videocast, and certainly the ones after that, as John may or may not make decisions about these kinds of things. It may take a bit longer than that, but we will keep you abreast of the process, you can be sure. So, on behalf of John, I thank you once again for joining us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Good night.
Good night.